Welcome back to Your Fantasy Nerd, and I'm going to be bringing you the wide receiver and tight end rankings for the Week 5 rankings. And as always, I apologize for last week for not making any rankings. So going 1 through 10 here, at number 1, Julio Jones. Number 2, Demaryius Thomas. Number 3, Odell Beckham Jr. Number 4, DeAndre Hopkins. Number 5, Julian Edelman. 6, Randall Cobb. 7, Antonio Brown. 8, Calvin Johnson. 9, Keenan Allen. And at number 10, Dante Moncrief. So the first guy I want to talk about is at number 4, DeAndre Hopkins. I personally have him at number 4. He actually has 3 out of his 4 games in which he has 95 yards or more. He's got 3 touchdowns. He's got over 400 yards of receiving, and he's going up against the Colts this week. That's a really good matchup for him. Not a great defense at all, and I really think Hopkins is going to have a great game at home, and this game really looks like it's going to be a DeAndre Hopkins show with, I don't even know who is at quarterback, Mallett or Hoyer, we'll see, but Hopkins is the only guy out there, so he's a definite stud this week. All right, the next guy is Antonio Brown at 7. I have him at 7 as well. He actually has 3 games over 100 yards, where he used to be the number 1 wide receiver, but I think as long as Big Ben is out, he is no longer a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. When you look at his week last week, he had 5 catches for 42 yards with Michael Vick. And Michael Vick just doesn't throw the ball that well compared to Ben Roethlisberger, so I think Pittsburgh's going to rely heavily on the run game with Le'Veon Bell and spelling in D'Angelo Williams, but this is no longer a great option. He's a great option, but he's no longer a top 5 guy for me anymore. And sitting at 7, that doesn't mean sit him by any means. He's still a wide receiver 1, but he no longer has that it factor where he's going to get you 70 yards and almost always a touchdown. So I think he loses that factor. But don't trade him or anything. I think you keep him and wait for Ben to come back, and then he'll be okay again. All right, now moving on to 11 through 20. At number 11, James Jones. Number 12, Jeremy Maclin. 13, Emmanuel Sanders. 14, Allen Robinson. 15, A.J. Green. 16, Jordan Matthews. 17, Amari Cooper. 18, T.Y. Hilton. 19, Mike Evans. And at number 20, Larry Fitzgerald. So I want to talk about 2 guys on this list. First guy being Amari Cooper at 17. I also have him at 17. Basically, he's going up against the number 1 pass defense this week against Denver. Denver's got a really solid front. They've got great cornerbacks, and this is just not a week I'm trusting Cooper. At 17, yeah, that means I think you should start him still, but if you've got 2 or 3 guys above him on our rankings, I think you definitely sit Cooper. I'm not in love with his matchup this week, and I really think that hinders his opportunity. I think Derek Carr sort of proved that he came back down to earth in a tremendous matchup he had against the Bears, and they couldn't even win the game, so that scares me slightly going up against a much better Denver offense. So I'm not a huge fan of Cooper this week. All right, at number 20, Larry Fitzgerald. I have him at 20 as well. He's just been awesome. He's got 5 touchdowns, 432 yards. He's the number 2 wide receiver so far in fantasy. But he's going up against Detroit. It's not a great matchup again. The Seattle wide receivers were not great last week, and I really think that'll continue this week. Arizona going at Detroit. Not that makes a huge difference, but Larry Fitzgerald is the number 1 option right now. John Brown's a close second, but Larry Fitzgerald, you know what? I'm starting him, but I'm not starting him as a top 5 or top 10 wide receiver this week. He's definitely a low-end wide receiver too, and I'm just a little bit fearful with the matchup. All right, now moving on to 21 through 30. At 21, John Brown. 22, Allen Hurns. 23, Martavis Bryant. 24, Pierre Garçon. 25, Stevie Johnson. 26, Vincent Jackson. 27, Leonard Hankerson. 28, Eddie Royal. 29, Brandon Cooks. And at number 30, Travis Benjamin. So I only want to talk about one guy on this list, and that's Pierre Garçon at 24. I have him at 24 as well. He's the number 1 threat for Kirk Cousins, the quarterback in Washington. And Kirk Cousins has actually not been terrible. The last 2 weeks, he's actually been very solid. He's averaging 6 catches per game, and he's the 30th wide receiver right now. He's going up against at Atlanta. Actually, the pass defense isn't bad for Atlanta, but it's still not a great defense in general. They're going to produce points, I think, and Washington's going to produce a lot of points in this game. I can see this game being a pretty high-scoring affair. And I just think Garçon's going to maybe not catch a touchdown, but 7 catches, 50, 60 yards at 6 points. That's not great, but I think he's solid. I think he's someone who's going to have a high ceiling, or a high floor and a low ceiling. So that's my feelings on Garçon. All right, now moving on to tight end. Going to go through the top 12 At number 1, is it really ever not going to be this guy? Rob Gronkowski. Number 2, Martellus Bennett. 3, Travis Kelce. 4, Charles Clay. 5, Jason Witten. Jimmy Graham at 6. Richard Rodgers at number 7. 8, Delaney Walker. 9, Tyler Eifert. 10, coming back from suspension, Antonio Gates. Number 11, Gary Barnidge. And number 12, Kobe Fleener. I want to talk about 3 guys on this list. The first guy is Charles Clay at number 4. He didn't get off to a great start. I've got him at number 4. But when you look at his last 2 weeks, I'll quickly go through his stats. He's averaging 7 catches for 96 yards, and he's getting better too. His numbers have increased every week. It's been pretty impressive. And he's going up against Tennessee this week, who's 28th against tight ends. I don't know if you remember, but week 1, Tennessee took on Kansas City. I don't know if you remember Travis Kelce with his little shmoney or his little touchdown dance. And I just think Charles Clay's in a great situation, especially this week going up against Tennessee. So definitely start Charles Clay. I think going forward, you can say he's a tight end 1, a fringe tight end 1. I'd say a top 10 tight end, maybe 9 or 10 every week. But in a matchup like this, I think he's a great player. All right, at number 7, Richard Rodgers. I've got him at number 8. He's another player like Charles Clay where he's really starting to fit in the offense much better. Green Bay's always been kind of missing that tight end since they lost Jermichael Finley a couple years back to those head injuries or neck injuries, and I think Richard Rodgers might be the guy. I mean, they always look to run 3 wide receiver sets with a tight end on the side, so it's just something that fits this Green Bay offense. It's kind of like seeing Jimmy Graham moving on from New Orleans. Someone has to fill that role. I think someone has to fill that Finley role, and I think it's Richard Rodgers, and I think he'll be okay the rest of the year. He's the 14th tight end right now, but those numbers are kind of off just a bit because he didn't really get off to a great start. He's going up against St. Louis. That's a decent defense, so I'm a little scared about starting him this week. I've got him at 8, so I'll start him, but if you've got better options, I think you wait on Rodgers. I think you sit him on your bench. The last guy, this is another one of those guys, we probably haven't heard of him, but hey, he's making noise. Gary Barnidge at number 11. I have him at 9. I mean, let's take you back for a second. Gary Barnidge, he's on Cleveland, first of all, if you didn't know. And in his last 2 weeks, this is another great stat. He's averaging 90 yards, and he has 2 touchdowns in those 2 weeks, okay? This guy's actually been a great player. He's getting 6 catches in the last 2 games, so he's getting the volume there, and I really think that Gary Barnidge is improving and becoming a reliable threat in that Cleveland offense. And especially now if Cleveland can get some sort of consistency out of Josh McCown being back, hopefully. I still think Manziel should start, but Cleveland decides against it. But McCown, I think if he can stay consistent and stay on the field, this is a nice little dink and dunk for Gary Barnidge, I think. And the rest of the season, he's not a tight end 1, I don't think, rest of the season. But as long as he maintains his abilities with his 6 catches and his 90-plus yards, I think he's okay. So he's going up against at Baltimore, who's the 7th, who is 7th against tight ends this season. So not a great matchup, but I actually like Barnidge this week. I'm starting him. But that'll wrap up our wide receiver and tight end rankings. Go ahead and check out the actual Week 5 rankings of all 3 of our rankings at yourfantasynerd.com. And as always, subscribe at yourfantasynerd right here on this channel. So thanks for watching, folks.